Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Flan, here we go. Touchdown!
You are listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right. Of the week, we've got an interesting game to break down on both sides of the ball. As the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 370. At the top of today's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with Greg Cosell from NFL Films so we can discuss our biggest takeaways from the film and the Eagles' tight loss to the Los Angeles Chargers. I thought there were some really good things to glean from the tape on both sides of the football. Greg and I will get into it right at the top of the show and spin this forward to next week's matchup against the Denver Broncos. Before we get there, though, just a couple of things I want to make sure we hit on. Number one, make sure you head on over to our Apple Podcast page. Leave us a rating. Leave us a comment. If you've got a question about this Eagles football team, jump on over to that page. Leave us the question right there in the comment box. We will get to it. Obviously, make sure you are subscribed so you can get the show sent to your phone or to your podcast device twice weekly right here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. As well, make sure you go check out our All 22 segment, All 22 review segment. That's all the plays that Greg and I are going to talk about here on tonight's show. I break it all down over on the All 22 review. You can find that over on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles YouTube page, really all of their digital channels. Also, the post-snap read. You want to go make sure you read up on what my thoughts were from the Eagles' offensive philosophy going into this game. And I thought they did a really good job with play sequencing and running complementary plays. We're going to talk about it a little bit here with Greg. But again, I dig into it a little bit more in the post-snap read. You can go find that on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Of course, I will tweet that out as well. For those of you who are paying attention to the NFL draft and to what those top prospects could be, obviously the Eagles in position right now to have 3 first-round picks potentially in next year's draft. If you want to know who those top names are, who you need to know, make sure you go over and subscribe to the Journey to the Draft podcast. Myself, Dane Brugler, Ben Fennell, Ross Tucker, Eric Galko, Chris McPherson. We're all on the whole rotation, a whole Rolodex of guests. We are continuing to roll through that show. Make sure you go subscribe to the Journey to the Draft podcast. We are hitting on all of those top names each and every week, twice weekly, there on that show platform. You can find that wherever podcasts can be found. That said, let's get into tonight's show. Excited to chat with Greg Cosell to talk through Eagles Chargers here in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
All right, it's time now to dive into the film with my friend Greg Cosell here for Chalk Talk. Greg, welcome to Week 10 here in 2021. It's going fast.
Crazy that it's Week 10. It's hard to believe, but yeah, it's here.
Yeah, no question. And an interesting game to break down. I actually had a lot of fun breaking down this game on both sides of the football here Monday morning. Eagles lose to the Chargers. So it was right down to the wire. I thought there was interesting things to take away from both sides of the football. We'll start on offense where Greg, there was a lot talked about, basically all over the Philadelphia area in regards to this offensive identity and what does this offense want to do? What do they do best? Really over the first 6-7 weeks of the season. Well, through Week 8 and Week 9, I think where that identity might be starting to crystallize in terms of what they will be moving forward. Now that we've got this 2-game sample, and it's kind of interesting. And it's something I wrote about over on the post snap read here on PhiladelphiaEagles.com this week. But I think that it's real. We're still really starting to get a sense of how potentially they might try and play here moving forward the rest of this year.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was a game, and they showed elements of it last week. But against Detroit, but I thought in this given game, you really saw the offense have kind of a rhythmic feel and a rhythmic flow to it with the way they use the run game, the way they use the pass game off of it. So it really kind of looked pretty rhythmic to me. The good sense of timing. I like what they did with the play action pass game, some under center, some in the shotgun, but it definitely, you know what? It's weird to say based on where we've been, but it was just a really good game to watch. And I thought the Eagles offense looked good.
Yeah, I mean, right now, through the last 2 games, they lead the NFL in run rate. They're running it just about 64% of the time, which is number 1 in the NFL. Weeks 1 through 7, it was down to 30th in the NFL. It was 30% of the time. So more than twice the rate at which they were in the first 7 weeks of the season. And that has shown up in multiple ways. I mean, we're seeing the play action numbers go up. We're seeing obviously the yards after contact, the explosive runs. They're being a little bit more aggressive downfield because with some of those play action plays, we're seeing more intermediate chunk plays to Dallas Goedert and to Devontae Smith. So getting those guys going a little bit further down the field, again, just kind of a little bit more of a sense of what the identity will be with this offense. And Jalen Hurts has not cracked 20 pass attempts each of the past 2 weeks, but he's been efficient as a passer. And when he's dropped back, they've been doing a nice job, whether it's screen game or off play action, of defining some of these throws, getting Devontae Smith, getting Dallas Goedert, those guys the ball on the run.
Yeah, well, he did have 24 dropbacks, so they did call 24 pass plays. Obviously, he ran a number of times.
Sure.
He only ran 57 offensive plays, and when you play that way, and obviously the opponent also made the game quicker as well with all the quick game throws, so the clock did not stop because there were not many incompletions by Justin Herbert. But you made a great point. I think the play action pass game, and I've talked about this quite a bit, really going back to the beginning of the season, that I kind of felt that this might be one way to go because what it does, you saw some of those intermediate routes in the middle of the field, the post-cross combination. You saw the out routes to Devonta Smith. Those are spot throws. You're not waiting for Devonta Smith to see where he breaks. Those are timed throws. So they're spot throws. And as you know, with the post cross, particularly when you get single high, you're just reading the safety, the deep post safety, and he tells you where to throw the ball. So it really helps with the reading process for Jalen Hurts, and it works really well under center as well with the play action pass game, because the under center play action pass game has a much bigger effect on second level defenders than the shotgun play action pass game.
Yeah, and certainly, Jalen Hurts, I think I mentioned already, 10 for 12 off play action these last couple of weeks. So it's been something that has worked for him. He's been very efficient in those situations, whether it's been under center or in the shotgun. I think one area of the offense, I think that will be really important for them moving forward, because last week against Detroit, the Eagles, they just had so much success running the football. They didn't face a ton of third down situations, right? And so you come into this game, they ended up 8 for 12 on third down. That's a good number, obviously.
Sure.
That's where you want to be. But when you look at those third downs and say, okay, let's just kind of hash these out. That's something I talked about on the post-game show after the game. He had 9 dropbacks, Jalen Hurts, on third down. He had those 2 incompletions, the one on the opening drive to Dallas Goedert that he missed Dallas Goedert, the one to Devontae Smith in the end zone. That could have been a touchdown as well. Those guys just unable to hook up. You had the third down sack. All right, so there's 3 of those 9 dropbacks. The other 6 were scramble drill plays, and a bunch of them Jalen Hurts was able to pick up. One he threw to Dallas Goedert on the opening drive. The others he was able to pick up with his legs. But as you've talked about so many times in regards to other quarterbacks around the NFL, it just becomes a question of whether or not that is a sustainable form of third down offense. So when they get into, if you're going to play this way, if you're going to run the football and that's going to be the foundation, more often than not, you're going to face a lot of 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5s, because you're not going to run for 7 yards a clip against every defense, every single drive. And so I think that third down and medium offense, that third down and short offense, that's going to be imperative for them to play winning football consistently moving forward and keep those drives alive.
Yeah, and your point's a good one, because there were a number of completions that were not on third down where they went 7-man protection. Yeah. And with basically a 2-man route concept. We saw a couple of those. Smith, 23 yards on 2nd and 10 on the second possession of the third quarter. Then he had 19 yards on the fourth quarter touchdown drive, which actually was 2nd and 16. But these are 7-man protections, and obviously you're only sending out 3, and maybe someone leaks out, but you can't do that really on third down. Yep. So it's a great question. Look, we've seen in this league over the last number of years, we've seen more quarterbacks that have the ability to run and make plays with their legs. Obviously, the Chargers did not do a good job at all, because all those runs came to the right, and that's exactly where you do not want him to go. So they really struggled with their pass rush concepts, and that won't be the case with every team. I think it's kind of a mixed bag right now. Obviously, quarterbacks that can move around, if they can, it can be very effective. but obviously you would really like to see him make throws when the throws are there.
Sure. And I think one other big standout, obviously, from an individual player performance in this game, certainly the rookie first-round pick, Devontae Smith, his second 100-yard game. It was a featured part of the offense, a bunch of targets here in this one, especially down the field. Interested to kind of get your take, what you saw there from Devontae Smith in this game against the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see what we kind of knew. It's just this past game hasn't been consistent week to week, so therefore he doesn't put up numbers every week. But we know that he's a really smooth route runner. He's extremely refined. What really stood out to me, and I'm sure it did to you as well, is just how he uses his vertical stem, because he ran intermediate route concepts or essentially have vertical stems. And he really has a great feel for just angling slightly, bending his body, changing his pace and his tempo on routes. He's really good at separating at the top of his route stem. You really saw that this week. He's always had it, obviously. It's just that this week they were able to run plays where that was the case. I mean, the 27-yarder on the third possession was the post-cross combination that I mentioned where he ran the crosser, and he just does such a good job. I remember seeing that route from the end zone angle, and he just had that little step to the right and just enough of a body bend. I forget who the corner was. Might have been Campbell, but I forget. Where he just had enough body bend and he just stuck his foot in the ground and you just see Campbell pause for a moment and all of a sudden you get the needed separation. He's so good at those little details of route running.
And to me, like what makes him, and just as this is almost like a big picture wide receiver discussion, you talk about different tiers of route runners. There are lots of guys that can win in the quick game, and some guys are really good getting off the ball and winning, on a slant. Everybody's got to win on a slant if you're going to play in the NFL. There are some guys that are really good vertical route runners. They excel at getting defenders to flip their hips on a corner route or on a post route, or they run. They do a nice job stacking defenders on fades. They have a really good feel for running those deep vertical routes. To me, the guys that kind of separate though are the guys that really run the intermediate routes really well, because you need that savvy that you show in the quick game, but also you need to still have that element of juice to be able to push vertical, as you mentioned, and still be able to work a defender at the second and third level. And I think that when you're running those deep digs, those comebacks, those deep curls, that shows up with Devontae Smith time and time again. I think that's why there's a feeling that he could develop into one of the best route runners in football.
Yeah, and I think he's that guy. We all knew that coming into the league, that he was that guy. And we saw it this week. And notice all the routes we're talking about, though, he has the ability to sort of stretch his legs. He's a strider, so these are the routes he runs really, really well. He needs the ability to stride.
Yep. And then just looking at this offense schematically as well, we talked about some of the different things that we saw. The Eagles the last couple of weeks, they've played a lot of tight ends. I mean, second most in terms of multi-tight end usage in the NFL over this 2-game stretch. And I think one of the things they have really done a nice job of over these last couple of weeks as well has been play sequencing and running different complementary concepts off of base run plays or base pass plays. We've seen it more with the run play action pass element. But I thought in this game, there are several examples of them. Hey, we're going to run split zone. We run a lot of split zone, especially with Jordan Howard. Well, now we're going to run split zone where there's a zone read element and Jalen Hurts can keep it. Hey, we're going to run split zone and there's RPOs added onto it. So they're just continuing to add different layers to some of those base plays. And I think we're seeing that more often. We're over these last couple of weeks.
I think anytime you have a running quarterback or a quarterback who can run, I think split flow zone always gives you a zone read element. So I don't think that's unique to the Eagles, but it's funny. We spoke last week about their third possession. This week, it was their fourth possession. I mean, the first 11 plays of their fourth possession came out of 13 personnel, Fran.
And lots of looks from the 13 personnel.
Yes. And 9 of those 11 came with Hurts under center.
Yep.
And 9 of the 11 were called runs. So you're talking about a 15-play drive. I'm not counting the field goal, but so 15 offensive plays, 12 called runs, and 12 plays that came out of 13 personnel. And with Hurts under center. So to me, this is how their offense net works best, because it gives you so much with the play action pass game, because, there's so much I could get into here, but people can't see it. But the point is the play action pass game under center really impacts second level defenders far more than the play action pass game in the shotgun. And there's so many elements to that, as you know, but it just impacts it so much more. And it automatically gives you the boot element, which you don't really have with the quarterback in the shotgun.
Sure. And it's something, if you're out there, if you're one of our listeners looking for some of those visuals, I do show some of these clips over on the All 22 review, which you can go check out over on the Eagles YouTube page and any of the Eagles digital channels. Greg, let's flip over to the defensive side. And obviously a lot of discussion about the defense and the philosophy coming in. And there are some individual players I do want to ask you about, but I do think it's really interesting, Greg. We talk about the change in the identity for the Eagles offense. Looking at this Eagles defense this week, they played more single high man than any team in the NFL in Week 9. They blitzed more than at any point that they had this season in this game. There's still only 13, 14 blitzes, depending on the service, but there still are, there was a little bit of a change in philosophy here in this game. Now, they still played a lot of off coverage, so it was loose man, but it was a lot of single high man coverage, whereas we've seen previously a lot of split safety zone. So interesting to see the change philosophically here in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I made that point too, that they play more snaps of cover one than they had in any previous game. They were more aggressive with pressure, that the defense has been evolving as the season has progressed into much more of a single high safety defense. But you're right, they played off coverage man as opposed to press man, and I'm sure some people would like to see them play press. Maybe we're getting to that, who knows.
Yep.
And then obviously, because it still presented a lot of clean quick game throws for Herbert, and the fact that his completion percentage was again off the charts, that becomes problematic for a lot of fans. But I think they're moving in this direction. We saw some of it last week against Detroit. Obviously, people would say Detroit's not very good on offense. I don't think people would say the same thing about the Los Angeles Chargers. So, they did give them a lot of those throws. And obviously, you don't want to do that because Justin Herbert is very, very rhythmic and the ball just comes out. And obviously, it comes out quick. Obviously, in the fourth quarter, when they were playing with Epps at the slot corner position and the rookie McPherson on the outside due to injury, it's easy to just make blanket statements, but you have to be a little careful with that. You got two guys, one guy who's playing out of position and another guy who's a rookie who's hardly played any
his first football
snaps, up to that point.
No, that's a really good point. I think when too, looking at, you mentioned the quarterback completion percentage. And look, we've been talking on this show going back to January when it was talked about, hey, Jonathan Gannon's going to be the defensive coordinator, and talking about where he comes from in Indianapolis. When you see those defenses with the Colts and some of these other defenses that are built that way, completion percentages are typically going to be high. Now, this is an extreme, what we're seeing here, right? Obviously, you don't want it to always be 85% completion percentage for the opposing quarterback. What I would say is that there's a difference between some of these completions are good completions to give up. Some of them are not as good, right? So there were a couple, blown coverages to one side where, maybe there was a miscommunication between. There were a couple of those in this game. The one to Jared Cook in the flat where he ran down. It was the first half. He's running down the sideline into the red zone. That to me, that was some kind of miscommunication in coverage there. That's a bad completion. If a linebacker gets held up on some play action fakes and now he loses his guy in the flat, that's a bad completion to give up, right? But look, there are going to be some plays where if you're playing soft zone, you're playing soft man, you're inviting that completion to be made. We praised it last week when they played cover zero and the ball comes out fast and Darius Slay goes out and makes the tackle. That's a good completion to give up, right? Well, there are some of those in this game. It's about more limiting some of those bad completions. And it's no different than, back in week 2, week 3, when the Eagles were having troubles stopping the run. And we say, look, you can give up 2, 3, 4, 5 yard runs. It's about not giving up the 6, 7, 8, 9 yard runs. It's the same thing when I look at some of these completions. I don't look at all of them and say, this is just a blanket statement. They need to force more incompletions. It's more about limiting the ones that you do give up, because Jared Goff completed a boatload of passes a week ago. The Lions were never in that game. Completion percentage can be a tricky stat from that standpoint.
Yeah, and obviously you do know when you play this way that you are going to give up completions.
Exactly.
You're going to give up some yards. And the goal, of course, is to limit big plays. That first drive by the Chargers where they got the ball at whatever yard line and they went all the way down, and the Eagles played great tight red zone defense. And then they got back down there on their second possession and they had a really well-designed play for a touchdown to Steven Anderson on a 2-yard touchdown, which was a beautifully designed play. And Edwards was he was in man coverage on Anderson, but you had that ISO lead action to the boundary with Anderson then changing direction. That's a tough deal for TJ Edwards. Yep. I mean, that's just a tough deal. You can't really say, oh, he screwed up. That's a really tough deal. He had to react to the run action from the 2-yard line. Yep. But obviously you're counting on teams making a mistake, whether it's an incompletion, whether it's, hey, you do stop them in the run game and all of a sudden it's 2nd and 10, maybe there's a penalty. I mean, what you don't want to give up is the 49-yarder to Williams that started the second possession of the third quarter. But see, there's a perfect example. Slay was matched man-to-man on Williams, and people are crying for, hey, let's play man. We've got Darius Slay. And this is no knock on Darius Slay.
Because it was tightly covered. It was a great catch.
Right. Catch. And he's a really good player. That's not no knock, but you can't just throw out platitudes, and it doesn't always work like that.
Was that not the same play that we broke down an Eagles game plan last week, Greg, against the Cleveland Browns with Mike Williams streaking across the field and Herbert throwing across his body? I'm pretty sure it was the same concept.
Yeah, it probably was. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was pretty simple. But,
and I mean, that was, Williams got on top of Slay early in the route. Slay kind of recovered, and it was a great throw and a great catch. I mean, he's, you have your best corner matched against their big play receiver, and you know what? The offense won. But for the most part, I think the Eagles probably played defense in this game. And this will sound crazy because they lost. They probably played it the way they kind of wanted to. They just got stuck in the fourth quarter, having to put bodies out there in positions that they just, they didn't want to be in that situation.
Man, at the end of the day, I mean, that second to last drive, not the game-winning one, but the one before, you had 3 third and longs that you couldn't get off the field. You had the ticky-tack penalty on Darius Slay, which was, a very questionable call, from a defensive holding standpoint. Then you had the 3rd and 6, Derek Barnett jumping off sides, create the 3rd and 1, that perhaps the QB sneak. And then you had the 3rd and 9, the 18-yard dig route or the deep curl to Keenan Allen, which was a strike from Herbert. He throws a seed and puts it on him, and, they're able to move the sticks. But 3 third and long situations where the defense unable to get off the field. Those are that's the thing where you're trying to, you can't have those to play and play defense.
Right. You can't play this style of defense and give up 3rd down conversion.
That's the goal. Yep. No question. That's a big thing that, was an issue for them in this game. Looking at TJ Edwards, once again,
he played really well in this game.
Played really well in this game, right? Downhill, sideline to sideline, led the team in tackles, but just watching him on film, his presence was felt.
Without question. And obviously, he played every snap. And they made a decision that Edwards and Taylor are the linebackers. They're going to give Taylor the shot to see how he plays, I'm sure, the rest of the year, unless they think he's playing lousy. But I actually think he's playing a little better each week. And I'm not putting him on every play. You're probably looking at him a little more closely than I am, Fran. But I think he's getting better every week. But Edwards is... I thought he actually showed some range in this game, which, was always the knock on him, that he was basically just a box player. I thought he showed some range to make plays outside the box, but I love the play where he blew up the ISO lead block of Anderson in the red zone on the second possession of the third quarter. He's one of those guys, and he was undrafted because the measurables didn't suggest that he could be a nickel player with the range and, to do the things necessary in the pass game. And we'll see as this season goes on, but there's no question he flashes.
And to me, like when you talk about his skill set and some of the areas that we felt like the Eagles need to get better at early in the season in terms of stopping the run and getting a little bit better in the box, was winning more of those one-on-ones in terms of defeating blocks. And that's where he has excelled. I mean, whether you talked about the ISO lead play, but even just beating guards from tackles, beating blocks from guards, just his ability to play downhill, navigate through traffic. He's done that very well. You can't, when you're playing with these light boxes, you can't trade 1-for-1 defensively. It can't, because otherwise that's a win for the offense. You've got to be able to make them go 2-for-1 to get that numbers game back in your favor.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you about one play, it was actually the first possession of the third quarter. Okay. It was 3rd and 4 where Keenan Allen caught a slant against Maddox.
Yep. Okay. I remember this play well. Go ahead.
Okay. He beat him off the ball, but Maddox gave up the inside.
Right. So if I remember right, was Singleton the linebacker there?
Don't remember that. But I thought Maddox played Allen as if he had help immediately to the inside because he gave him the inside.
Right. So we played this back a few times, and when you looked at all the other corners, it felt like all the other corners were playing with slight inside leverage, whether they were inside corners or the other defensive back in the slot to the top of the screen. It felt like everybody else was playing inside leverage. The linebacker, I'm pretty sure it was Singleton, was mugged up on the line of scrimmage, and he ended up blitzing on the play, and they dropped Derek Barnett. If this is the same play I'm remembering, they dropped Derek Barnett. He came off, so it was a zone exchange pressure, and I felt like Barnett was the whole player, but he dropped back vertically. He didn't get to the hole. He didn't get to between the hashes. So I don't know if that's one of those things where, okay, does Maddox need to be playing with more inside leverage and not give up that inside because that help is on the opposite hash? Or does Barnett need to get more to the middle of the field? That's one of those things where, without being in the room, I don't know. But that was kind of how I read that play. But Ben Fennell and I went back as we were watching, rock that back and forth a bunch of times, just trying to get a better sense of that completion.
Well, I'm gonna actually look at it right now as we're talking. So
yeah, all right. I'll let you keep searching.
I can pull it up right now.
But that's a good example, though, Greg, of what I was saying earlier in terms of like the good completions versus the bad completions and how.
Right, so it is Singleton, and they're in their 5-1 nickel front. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Because I'm looking at it now. Yeah, and Barnett. Well, no, Singleton did not blitz. They're playing man. Singleton had the back.
Singleton has the back. Okay.
Singleton had the back. Barnett dropped out. So it's basically. Everybody's playing man. Now, Barnett was on the other side. Barnett was on the boundary, and Allen was in the field slot. Okay.
Yep. So it was opposite side of the field.
Right. So there's no way Barnett's going to impact this throw unless he literally ran there immediately.
Exactly. So that to me, that's what read to me as like, okay, the technique early in the down from Avonte Maddox just off by a step.
He's playing outside technique.
He's playing outside technique.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And then he just opens up and lets him inside of him, which, and everybody else is playing hard man with inside leverage.
With inside leverage, forcing him out to the sideline, away from the middle of the field. So, but that's an example, Greg, of exactly what I was talking about earlier in terms of like, those are the completions. Those are the ones that you need to correct, right?
Correct.
And they're playing man to man. That's not a soft, too high zone completion.
And by the way,
right?
this time they were playing kind of press man.
Yeah.
This was not soft man because it was 3rd and 4. So it wasn't 3rd and 10. So anyway, that was just struck me. That's I wanted to ask you about that.
I'm glad, but that's a perfect example. I'm so glad you brought that play up because it's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. That there are a handful of examples in this game of, man, if a couple things, one thing changes, all of a sudden now, that completion percentage looks a little bit different, and we're not having that discussion. But obviously they weren't different, and you had that huge completion percentage from Justin Herbert, from the opposing quarterback, and it's happened a lot here this season. But in this game, it was different because of the defensive philosophy. It was just so starkly different from what we've seen in weeks past. I thought that was
you're also dealing with a really high level quarterback. I mean,
no doubt.
I mean, Herbert's really a high level player.
Yeah. Just looking at the rest of the defense real fast, you mentioned some of the injuries on the back end. So we saw a bunch of young players. Andre Sacheret jumped in to be the nickel corner early on.
He played a bunch of snaps in the first. I guess when Maddox got hurt the first time, he came. He was the guy who came in. I guess they weren't happy with him or whatever. I don't know. But the second time, obviously, they did not bring him in. They moved Epps to the slot corner position. Yeah,
and so Epps comes in the slot. We saw, it's just some different rotations there in the back end. And then up front, I thought overall, the run defense was pretty good here in this game. We talked about TJ Edwards. We talked about Davion Taylor, who I agree continues to flash. It's not all perfect for him at this point, but continuing to see him make plays downhill and out in space. I thought Fletcher Cox of the defensive lineman probably had the best game in terms of defending the run. But I think overall, obviously everybody's going to point to the rush and the pass rush. But look, in this game, I mean, Herbert was getting the ball out really, really fast.
So
that's tough.
I mean, obviously he wasn't sacked and he was rarely under duress, but he was getting the ball out quick.
Yeah, that's a tough game for to kind of judge these defensive linemen. So, it's kind of a tough guy. And look, that's self-scouting from a Charger standpoint that against this defensive line with some of the issues we've had up front offensively, we're not gonna give them time to be able to get home.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's now spin this forward to the game this week against the Denver Broncos, and an interesting team. That here's the thing. To be honest, coming in after studying the Broncos last week, because I'll usually start looking at the next opponent on Thursday and Friday of the previous week, so that by the time I talk to you on Monday night, I'm pretty well versed in what we're discussing. I was a little worried that, hey, I don't know if there's a lot of juice about this Broncos team. They just traded Von Miller. They got a bunch of guys hurt. They had a couple more injuries here this weekend as well. Then they go out and they just destroy the Dallas Cowboys. I'm like, all right, Eagles fans will have plenty of juice now for this game, plenty to talk about here with this Broncos team. We'll start on the offensive side of the football, where Eagles fans are well aware of their offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, who had a couple stints here in Philadelphia. So Pat Shurmur, the OC, Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on this offense. We'll start with the pass game. What do you feel is the identity for them from a pass game standpoint?
Well, I think a lot of it does work off the run game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yep.
I think that they're really a running football team to start. And they've got two backs who are somewhat similar in that they're both big physical runners. They're both 220 plus. Well, I don't know if Gordon technically is, but he's close. But he's big. They're physical. I think they're tempo setter type runners. They're attitude runners. I think Williams just has more skill overall, but they play both backs and they feature, the zone game. They feature some gap scheme stuff. They pull guards. It's a pretty multiple run game and they try to be physical. And then they play a lot out of 12 personnel. I mean, I think when you look at just for the season, they play 12 personnel about 30% of their snaps, and the percentage goes up. When you look at first down, they're close to 40%. So this is a team that lines up a lot in 12 personnel. Now, they've got someone like Noah Fant, who is a very athletic tight end, who just because you're in 12 personnel, it doesn't mean he's attached to the formation. He can be detached. But I think that's where it starts. I think they try to have a vertical element to their passing game. Bridgewater is a quarterback that's always had a tendency to hold on to the ball too long in the pocket, and he's therefore susceptible to sacks. I think he's near the top of the league in terms of being sacked, but they do try to have a vertical element to their passing game. They'll run just straight go routes. I mean, they want to get the ball down the field. We don't think of Teddy Bridgewater that way as a big power arm guy because he's not that, but you don't have to have a power arm to make certain vertical throws. And they clearly want to do that.
I mean, coming into this game, I haven't looked at the updated number, but I know coming into week 9, they were third in the NFL in terms of their deep pass attempts. They want to push the ball down the field, 16.3% of their passes traveling 20 plus yards. So they want to be able to push the ball down the field. So I was interested kind of going back and I just kind of watched all of their deep passes thinking like, okay, maybe there's some interesting vertical route concepts, where maybe they have a go-to, but it really, as you mentioned, a lot of it were just, hey, we're going to throw a fade to Cortland Sutton. Hey, we're going to throw a go ball to Tim Patrick, and we're going to let these two twin towers out in the perimeter just go up and make a play. And sometimes those guys are able to go up and make those plays.
We saw one this week with the 44-yard touchdown to Patrick, who, by the way, is a pretty good player. And
Tim Patrick's a good player. He's going to be a free agent. He's a really interesting player. I studied him a little bit last year just because I was kind of studying some of the bigger receivers around the NFL. This is a kid who was a former undrafted free agent from Utah, 6'4", 212 pounds. He'll play inside and outside. He's a big body, but he moves pretty well and he catches everything. I think Ben Fennell looked up the stat earlier today. He had one drop in the last 2 seasons. This is a guy who's really impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, the play that we were talking about is he just ran a stutter go versus Trayvon Diggs, and he beat him. He got on top of him. He, not by a ton, but enough. And see, Bridgewater, that was a beautiful ball. Bridgewater just put it right there. So, Cortland Sutton can get vertical. When it comes to verticality, size is a trait because it's stride length. So even though Patrick and Sutton are not 4'4" guys, that stride length makes up for a lot of that. And you could see Patrick, for instance, on that play. We've seen Sutton throughout this season get on top of corners on vertical routes. Now that Judy's back, he's a really good intermediate route runner. So they've actually got a lot of weapons. Noah Fant hasn't necessarily put up big numbers, but he's a guy that can also run. So they do have a lot of talent at wide receiver.
Yeah, Noah Fant out this past week. He was on the COVID list, but we'll see if he is back for next Sunday. Albert Okwuegbunam, the backup tight end,
From Missouri.
fourth-round pick out of Missouri. I mean, he was a big-time player early on in his college career because of that athletic skill set. I mean, this is a guy that has that ability. I mean, 6'5", 260 pounds. He can get down the seam and be a factor. So they definitely have some interesting pass catchers to go along with that run game. Along the offensive line, they've had to move some pieces around due to injury. Garrett Bowles couldn't go this week, so they shifted over the right tackle, Calvin Anderson. They had a couple guys playing right tackle. They lost Graham Glasgow, the right guard, to injury. So now they have a rookie, Quinn Miners, who has to step in. So they've definitely moved some pieces around. They've put some assets, though, into this offensive line. A lot of first-round picks, a lot of day 2 picks. Dalton Risner, a second-round pick. Cushenberry, third-round pick. Quinn Miners now starting a second-round pick. So they've put some assets into this offensive line. Garrett Bowles, obviously, a former first-round pick as well, left tackle.
And I haven't studied him in great detail, but I thought Cushenberry had a great game this week.
Interesting. Yeah, he definitely shows up more in the run game for me.
Oh, for sure. I mean, because I said that I made a note that he had an outstanding game as a run blocker. He executed multiple blocking concepts, reach blocks, base blocks, combo blocks, second level blocks. He's a really good run blocker. And
we talked about the tight end usage. Eric Saubert is their third tight end, and he's their best blocker at that position for sure. A guy that you have to kind of account for when they play in line. Let's go over. Go ahead.
Just one point. I think Williams in particular, Gordon as well, but I think Javonte Williams, I think he's an eye back. Because you want to get him on his track with build-up speed and velocity. To me, he's not a shotgun runner. It doesn't mean he's never going to have a shotgun run, obviously. But I think he's an eye back. And I think that in many ways, Gordon is too, because they're both build-up speed and velocity runners that then develop power. You want to get them on a track. You don't want them to be starting, from a stopping position. You want them to get the ball as they're already moving.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Williams is just he is such a load to bring down. He's had a couple of runs this year where the first 3 tackles are on him, and somehow his legs just keep going and he wriggles out of it. He had a 30-yard run this week, but it hasn't just been that run. It's been others where he gets up to the second level and 2 or 3 guys bounce off him and he just still keeps going. It's funny. He broke every broken tackle and forced missed tackle metric that everybody had from a college football standpoint. You think, he's not going to bring that to the NFL. No, that's exactly the kind of runner he has been so far in his NFL career.
And I thought he was the best runner coming out of college.
Right.
Najee Harris was a more complete back because we saw his receiving ability at Alabama. But I thought Javonte Williams was the best pure runner of the backs who came out this past year.
And I don't study Melvin Gordon really as much just because he's been in the AFC West his entire career. But just kind of reflecting back, and it's been a long time, but reflecting back on my thoughts on him coming out of Wisconsin, I wasn't super high. I had some questions about him coming out. If I remember right, I'm pretty sure you and I saw him the same way. There were questions about that transition. I'll tell you what, his vision and patience really stand out to me. And that was not something I thought was a strength of his game early, as a rookie and early on in his career. But he really, he's been in the league for a long time. So he's seen, he's plenty battle tested at this point.
He's almost had, and he's not quite as good in terms of yardage and production, but he's almost had kind of a Clinton Portis career. When Clinton Portis was in Denver, he came in his first couple of years and he was an explosive back. And Gordon came out of Wisconsin. He had all those 40+ yard runs.
Yeah, and that was like the fly sweep. I remember that was like riveting. That was like, oh man, look at what they do with him. That's really creative. Now everybody does.
Yeah, he was a track runner basically. Yep. And then he got to the NFL and it didn't quite work out that way. And over time, he's really developed into a guy who gets hard yards. Yep. He's a tough, competitive inside runner. You rarely see him go distance. I guess he did have was it this year he had a really long run? I forget. Every once in a while he breaks one, but he's not really that kind of runner.
Right. It's just been interesting kind of seeing that because that's not what I know him as in my mind. So be able to see him execute these runs to the level that he has, I found to just be fun and impressive. Let's go over to the defensive side. Obviously, Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator, or the head coach rather, and in charge of that defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel, who's been in the league for a long, long time.
Oh, yeah.
So you get a sense of what those guys are bringing. But just the elevator speech on this defense before we get into some of the nitty gritty.
Oh, well, and you're dealing with, one of the smartest defensive guys. Other coaches view him as a savant, basically. So with Vic Fangio, you get to me, he's more about what happens in the secondary than he is with the line of scrimmage. I mean, I think that he's what he does with his safeties, to me, and it's subtle movements. It's not necessarily dramatic movements. What he does in coverage with match principles, I think that's really difficult for quarterbacks who are inexperienced. And at times it's really difficult for quarterbacks who are experienced. But I think that he does an awful lot. I think his linebackers are important. And obviously he's playing with linebackers now who just, they're not the guys he started the season with, obviously. No. In fact, Kenny Young just got there. So it's going to be really interesting. But they obviously did really well this past week. I mean, Baron Browning, they drafted this year, and he played every single snap this past week as basically a stack backer.
My guess is that was not the plan for him coming in. I mean, he was a rookie 3rd-round pick, and he was kind of seen as a little bit of a height, weight, speed project coming in because he played all over the place for Ohio State. He was a defensive end at times during his career at Ohio State.
Let me tell you something. I actually thought, and I took maybe a closer look at him than you did, simply because I was very curious because I kind of he had high level athletic traits. You and I both know he was a 5-star recruit coming out of the state of Texas, going to Ohio State, and it never quite happened for him that at Ohio State in terms of being that great player. But everybody saw the physical gifts. I got to tell you, I thought in this game, I thought he played with a pretty good sense of spatial awareness and zone coverage. Yeah, I thought he played very, very well in this game.
There was one where he matched the route that was developing behind him really well. He just took like one last peek, and then he lost the receiver, and it was a completion. Or it might have been a drop, actually. But it was a very nearly a great match from him in coverage.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got the trait. I mean, he's explosive. He's flying around all over the place. I mean, the traits are absolutely there. Just obviously a very inexperienced player.
And I actually thought both linebackers played with outstanding route and spatial awareness in coverage because they played a lot of zone.
Yep.
They rushed 4. I think only on 6 of Prescott's 43 dropbacks did they rush 5. So they basically rushed 4, played a lot of zone behind it. I mean, they played cover 1, good amount, but a lot of split safety zone coverage that featured match elements depending on the routes. And that's where it gets really difficult for opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit different from what we've seen because they were, I think, 6th in the NFL blitz percentage coming into the game. But you talk about what they do with their safeties. They're 2nd in the NFL pre-snap lining up in a 2-high shell. But they're also 2nd in the NFL in rotating down to a 1-high shell from those looks, right? So you're going to get a lot of those pre-snap disguises. We saw that on the interception by Caden Stearns late in this game in the second half, where you're going to see a lot of that late disguise from this secondary. And so it will be one of those mental games, another one of those mental tests for Jalen Hurts and this passing game.
But it's not, it's funny you say it's not just late movement. It's then what they do, because that interception was such a good example because, it looks disguised because it starts in a 2 shell and then you see Simmons, the boundary safety, kind of work his way down and you think, okay, it's still man, but it's a robber type thing. But then it doesn't end up, it's still man the way it's probably coached and taught, but then Stearns in a zone type principle passes off the receiver to Simmons, and he in a sense becomes the robber. So there's many little nuances and subtleties to what they do on the back end. And your point's exactly right. That's difficult for a quarterback, particularly when you get into longer yardage and 3rd down situations.
Yeah. And when you look at that secondary, a lot of moving parts back there, and the streak will be alive. I can't imagine that there's any of that. No one tracks this anywhere, but Greg, I believe this will be 7 games in a row now where the opposing defense that the Eagles are facing will be down 2 of their 3 starting corners that they came into the year with. Patrick Surtain goes down with injury. They don't fear that it'll be season ending. So with that,
what was the injury? Because I know he only played 30 snaps.
It was a leg injury. I didn't see exactly today. I just saw that the quote was the fear, or they did not think it would be season ending. So when you say that, my guess is he's not going to be suiting up in week 10. I don't think he'll be ready to go Sunday. Would be my guess.
No, if they say that, then he's certainly not playing this week.
Yeah. So, they had to do some rotating. No Bryce Callahan either. He went on injured reserve last week. So my guess is the way it'll look is you'll have Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby on the outside, and then you'll have Nate Hairston, the former Temple corner. He'll have to slide in and play some of the nickel. That's the way they finished this game. Fuller previously was the nickel. So again, kind of moving pieces back there in the secondary.
Yeah, I'm just looked it up while we're talking, and it says that he has just a knee sprain, whatever that means. I mean, that's what they, so I don't know what that means. I'm not a doctor, but yeah, it won't be season ending, but I'd be very surprised if he plays this week.
So we talked through the back seven a little bit. We talked about the linebackers, the corners, the safeties. Let's talk about this front. Obviously, they trade Von Miller, in a move to acquire some more draft capital. Who's going to be the presence up front? No Bradley Chubb. He's on injured reserve. So you're down your former top 10 pick off the edge as well. To me, the guys are Shelby Harris, who's a kind of a DND tackle hybrid. He's more of an inside
He's
guy.
He's been a good player for a couple of years. Not a known guy, but I'm sure he's not overlooked by people who watch tape. He's been a very solid player for them. Yeah,
disruptive. He's got heavy hands. He's got a quick first step. He's a guy certainly to watch. And then a young kid in Jonathan Cooper, who was
he flashed to me. I was going to mention him if you didn't. I thought he really flashed as an edge pass rusher. Of course, I thought the Cowboys moved Terrence Steele from right to left tackle, and I don't think he looked particularly comfortable at left tackle. But that's beside the point. But I thought Cooper definitely flashed. He showed up watching the tape of that game.
Yeah, some other guys are just, Malik Reed was out for this game. He was banged up. He's been a starting edge rusher for them. So Stephen Weatherly, who they just traded for from the Minnesota Vikings. A long kid, versatile. If there's any other pieces up front that kind of stand out to you, Draymond Jones has played plenty for them over these last couple of years as well.
Yeah, I thought Jones would end up being better because I thought he had really good tape at Ohio State and in terms of rushing the quarterback. And, he flashes here and there, but I thought he'd be better. I think, again, we talked about the linebackers. It's Young and Browning. I assume it'll be those two guys again.
Right.
One player who's really, really good is Justin Simmons.
Yeah.
And he's the BC kid, right?
Yes, he's from Boston College.
Yeah. I didn't think he'd be this good in the NFL.
I didn't either.
Honest with my evaluation when he came out, but he's long, he's athletic. I think he's smart. He's aware. In many ways, he's a perfect fit for the Vic Fangio defense.
Well, he's very similar to the kid that's down with the Rams. Why am I struggling on his name?
You mean the guy who's no longer with the Rams, John Johnson?
John Johnson. Now he's with Cleveland. That's right.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
Yeah.
Very, very similar from a skill set standpoint. And both guys have really flourished in that kind of system from that same tree of that Vic Fangio scheme. Simmons does everything, whether it's defending the run. He's kind of the traffic cop back there on the back end from a pass coverage standpoint as well. Again, just looking at the matchup, it's a big mental game for Jalen Hurts in this pass game. So the run game, we'll assume, will be a big part of what they try and do with the Eagles offensively here again.
And I'll be very curious when you do get into third downs, which you will.
Yep.
I think Caden Stearns has played really well as their dime safety this year.
Yep.
I've seen a lot of Denver's defense. He only plays 18% of the snaps because he's the dime. As you know, he was a big-time recruit going to the University of Texas. Never quite worked out for him, but he was a big 5-star. Everybody wanted him. I think he's really been a good player for them, and he can do a lot of different things, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him be a factor in this game because of Jalen Hurts, because Stearns is theoretically an athletic equivalent, which, to Jalen Hurts. And again, Vic Fangio is not going to give me a call and tell me what he's going to do, but it wouldn't surprise me if Stearns is a factor in this game, one way or the other.
Yeah, they play. I think they're in the top 10 in dime usage so far this season. Big part of that, certainly yesterday, Sunday, they played dime for most of the second half as Dallas was in catch-up mode. So, a lot of Caden Stearns in that game. So, Greg, we'll be back next week. We'll be breaking it all down. Thanks once again for joining us here on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
Thanks, Fran.
The Philadelphia Eagles, a new era, introduced the Fly Collection, an elevated, boldly branded apparel capsule with streetwear appeal that's different from your standard Eagles fan gear. The collection sees bold new graphic expressions of the Eagles brand on apparel essentials like hoodies, t-shirts, jackets, and headwear. The designs are kept simple, mixing fresh, modern branding alongside bold punches of color, available exclusively at all Philadelphia Eagles Pro Shop locations and the team's official online store. Learn more and view the entire capsule at philadelphiaeagles.com/fly.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the draft mailbag.
Great Great stuff from Greg, who you can follow on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here with Eagles Entertainment. You know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the best way is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leave us a rating or even leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out today to someone who did exactly that. Young IG left a 5-star review saying, do you think the Eagles are doing a disservice to Jalen Hurts in regards to his depth of dropbacks in the pocket? 6'1" to 6'2" is relatively short for a quarterback when all of your offensive linemen are 6'5" and up. Historically, all short quarterbacks, whether it's Drew Brees, Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, or even Patrick Mahomes, all tend to drop back way further in the pocket to create better throwing lanes and to ultimately navigate the pocket better. Hurts told a reporter that you don't see what I see out there in regards to escaping the pocket so much. He has a problem with seeing a flash of pressure and escaping. I believe it's because he cannot see. Should he stand back a yard or two further so that he can create better throwing lanes? Do you think that the Eagles are aware of this, or is the youth within the coaching staff hindering Jalen? So, Young IG, good question. To answer the last part of your question, no, I don't think the youth on the Eagles coaching staff is hindering Jalen Hurts at all. I think that the one big thing to remember when it comes to quarterback dropbacks is that your dropbacks have to be mirrored to the play call. They have to be mirrored to the route concept. So if you are running deeper routes, then your drops are going to be deeper. If you are running shorter routes, then your drops are going to be shorter because your feet are typically going to be tied to your eyes and how you're getting through your progression. So that's why it's not just as simple as, hey, we're going to run these routes and we're going to drop back Jalen 2 yards deeper than that, because now Jalen's feet are not going to be tied up. When he's ready to throw the football, those routes are either going to be too late, they're going to have already been declared, or if it's the opposite, by the time Jalen's ready to throw, the receivers are nowhere close to their break points, right? So you want to make sure that your route, your depth of drop is always going to be tied to the routes that are called in that play. So that's always the number one thing to keep in mind. As far as quarterbacks being able to see through the trees a little bit, Russell Wilson has talked about this, and I remember asking Russell Wilson about this at the Senior Bowl 2012. It was one of my first times down to Mobile, and Russell Wilson, not only did he have the tallest offensive line in college football when he was at Wisconsin, he had the tallest offensive line in all of football, including the NFL, when he was at Wisconsin. They had a bunch of oak trees in front of him blocking for him up there with the Badgers that year. And he said, look, there are things that I have to do to be able to see through that, but it was never a hindrance for me. And I think that's ultimately when you have those, if you're a shorter quarterback, you're used to being a shorter quarterback, right? Chances are you were short when you were in high school, you were short when you were in college. It's going to be the same thing when you move to the NFL. You're still going to have to try and find ways to be able to operate from the pocket. Or if not, you could still get out of the pocket and create some plays. And I think certainly we see that from Jalen Hurts. I mentioned earlier today, this week was a display game for Jalen Hurts' ability to create outside of structure. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, some of them were runs, some of them were throws, but you saw his ability to break the pocket and create. And that's something that a lot of these younger quarterbacks have that ability to do. You still need to find way. You need to slowly get your way to where you can execute from inside the pocket and play within the structure of the offensive play call. But I think ultimately, when you're trying to work with a quarterback that has some of those deficiencies, and we talk about the size and the ability to see things, it's not just as simple as, hey, just drop back a little bit further. Because while the angles change a little bit, you're still going to deal with pressure. You're still going to deal with bodies around you. And so ultimately, that's what I think it comes down to for Jalen moving forward. Are there things you can do? Yeah, you can move the pocket. You can create some more well-defined throws. Look, that's why the Eagles have leaned heavily into the screen game. You've leaned heavily into the RPOs, and over these last couple of weeks, they've leaned more into some play action, right? So just something to continue to monitor. But again, it's not just as simple as I'll just drop a couple steps further in your drop, because that has to be married to the plays, to the routes around it. Everything's got to work in concert. So great question there from Young IG. Appreciate that, and appreciate everybody out there that continues to throw us your support over on our Apple Podcast page. Thanks to everybody for your support of all of our podcasts here with Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you later this week.